call this meeting in order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call. Councilmember Thomas and Councilmember Olson are both absent, and Councilmember Stone and Johnson and Mayor Kirchhoff are present. We had a agenda that was presented in your packet. Is there any changes to the agenda as presented? No. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So move.
Motion by Warren. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Seconded by Keith. Any discussion? I'll call the motion. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. 3 in favor, none against. We had the minutes that was in your packet from November 5th and November 12th. Is there any corrections or changes to the minutes as presented? Is there a motion to approve the minutes as presented?
So moved.
Motion by Keith. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Warren. Is there any discussion? Call the motion. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motions carries. 3 in favor, none against. At this time is our public open forum. Is there anybody here who wishes to address the council? Any comments at all? Seeing none, we will move into our public hearings. We do have one public hearing this evening. The hearing is to amend the TIF plan. So I will close the regular meeting, open up the public hearing. As I stated, we have a public hearing before us this evening regarding the amendment to our TIF plan. It is our intention that everyone has the opportunity to be heard. If you wish to speak, please sign in the back on a sign-up sheet, and we'll use the procedure as follows. First, a presentation by staff, followed by questions of staff. Secondly, the owner presentations or additions, followed by questions of owner. In this case, we will have Tammy present to us at that time. Then we'll take public input. Please raise your hand when recognized by myself. Approach the podium and state your name and address for the record. State your comments and position. No one will be allowed to speak a second time until everybody's had an opportunity to be heard. First, we'll hear questions for clarification. Then we'll hear those in favor of the proposal. Third, public speaking will be those against. After everyone who wishes to speak has had an opportunity to be heard, the hearing will be closed. After closure of the public hearing, the council will deliberate and take action as appropriate. At this time, members of the audience do not participate in the discussion unless a majority of the council concedes to hear additional information or questions. This hearing is now in session. Staff?
Actually, Tammy is going to.
All right, we'll jump right into step 2 then. Tammy, you want to present?
Good evening, Mayor, members of the City Council. I am Tammy Umdahl with Northland Securities. I assisted staff with the preparation of this modification. The public hearing is open. I would also mention that as part of this process, that the county commissioner that oversees this area was notified, as well as the school district and the county. And the period of time that they were notified was less than what is required by statute, and we sought their waivers, and it was provided in all 3 cases. And there were no comments to offer to the City Council this evening from either the commissioner, the county board, or the school district. So the other point, the Planning Commission has also considered this modification and has adopted a resolution finding that it is consistent with the plans of the city overall. So with that out of the way, a lot of paperwork with this modification. This district was actually established back in 1987. It will be decertified at the end of 2014, and that tax base will become part of the city's general tax base, and that would be true with your truth and taxation statements that are going to be mailed, that additional tax base. The modification that's proposed, there's 2 parts to it. You're modifying the development district, and the development district sometimes is generally referred to as the project area. And that boundary follows the boundaries of the city. We sometimes use the term coterminous with the boundaries of the city. The proposed annexation that you're going to take action on later this evening relates to this modification. And because the boundaries of the city are being modified, the boundaries of the development district need to be modified. And why would you do that? You would do that because that allows you to spend tax increment from TIF District 1 within that broader project area. And because tax increment financing district number 1 is something referred to as a pre-1990 district, there's a lot of flexibility with respect to use of those funds. So this gives you the broadest authority. So that's the first part of this. You're modifying the boundaries of municipal development district number 1. The second part of it is actually a modification to the TIF district. You're not changing the boundaries of tax increment district number 1. What you are doing is taking action to modify the source and uses of funds in the TIF plan to allow for you to use all of the tax increment that's available, as well as potential future land sale proceeds that may be available. So it gives you the broadest flexibility. That's important because after December 31st of this year, you can no longer go back and modify that TIF plan. So working with your staff, we made sure that the categories and the amounts were sufficient to give the City Council the broadest authority. So that's the second part of it, the modification. So after the public hearing, should you adopt this, that puts in place a revised boundary for the development district in which you can spend those tax increment dollars, and it provides a budget that will allow you to do so. So those are the two main points. I would be happy to answer questions now or later in the hearing.
Council have any questions for Tammy at this time?
No.
No, we don't. Thank you. Okay, we will move into the public side. Does anybody have any comments in regards to the public hearing this evening, amending the TIF plan? Any comments in favor or in opposition? And we'll ask a third time as required. Is there any comments in favor or opposition of the public hearing this evening? Seeing and hearing no comments, is there any additional information from staff before I close the public hearing? Is there any questions of council? Okay. At this time, we'll close the public hearing and we'll reopen the regular scheduled meeting. Thank you. All right, we'll move right into reports and presentations. Our insurance renewal, Mark Maloney, Minnesota National Bank Agency.
Hello, I'm here to do the annual renewal for the city, and at this meeting, usually every year, we consider whether or not to waive or not to waive the tort liability on the city's policies. And I'll just give a little break. I sent a little packet along, and I believe that's in your packet of all the coverage options. So I'll just do a brief little rundown of the options. So. Under the League of Minnesota Cities liability coverage, tort liability waiver options are if an entity does not waive the statutory limits, any individual claimant would be able to recover no more than $500,000 on any claim to which statutory limits apply. The total all claimants would be able to recover for a single occurrence to which a statutory tort limit apply would be a limit of $1.5 million. So if entity waives the statutory tort limits, a single claimant could potentially recover up to 1.5 on a single occurrence. If an entity waives the statutory tort limits and purchases excess liability coverage, which the city has in the past, the single claimant could potentially recover up to $2.5 million. If always purchase the $1 million excess coverage and waive the statutory limits, which provides the 2.5 of coverage, and I recommend that you continue to do that. Couple situations that tort limits may not apply to, and these situations would include claims under federal civil rights laws, Americans with Disabilities Acts. Another one would be where a city has assumed liability by contract. And number 3 would be claims for actions in another state. 4 would be claims based on the taking theory, land use, or inverse condemnation. And number 5 would be liquor liability claims. The annual cost of waiving is 3.5% of the general liability portion of the policy, which in your case this year would be about $1,100. And the excess umbrella coverage, which you've purchased in the past, it usually runs around 10%, and this last year was $10,176. So we're just asking for you to decide what you want to do this year.
Anybody have any questions for Mark at this time? As you noted, and as is in our agenda, we do have an action item under 7A. So that's where we'll take action on this, and we may have more questions at that time. Thank you, Mark. Moving on to reports from the Police Department, monthly report. Brian?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Activity report for October. We had, some of the numbers we had, 8 alarms, 25 assists for other agencies, 13 dog complaints. We had 8 small amount of marijuana and drug arrest. We had 22 medical calls, 6 car accidents, 22 suspicious calls, and we had 13 thefts. We gave out 204 verbal warnings. We had 9 welfare checks. So we had a total of calls for 335, verbal warnings of 204, total activity of 539. And if you look at it by, compared to September, we're down 3 on calls, down 32 on warnings, and down total 35. And then compared to last year, we were up 6 calls, up 10 warnings, and up a total of 16. And then also, Officer Jensen has been introduced to his dog. We just got to pick it out here 2 days ago. Got 3 to choose from. His name is Sonny.
Okay.
Hopefully his future's brighter.
He's a Rottweiler lab mix. So training will start with, he picks it up next Wednesday, and then he has it, he gets familiar with the dog, with each other, and then they start training together on December 8th. So he'll be in training for 2 weeks straight then with the K9, heading to Monticello every day for that training. So we're glad to finally get the dog picked out and have it, see it, and get going with that project.
So, this particular dog has been selected by the trainer already, I'm assuming then?
Yep.
And so we're at the point now where Officer Jensen will start working with the dog, because I assume the dog's already worked with the trainer up to this point?
Yes, correct. Yep. Quite extensively already, so.
Okay.
And now it's the officer's time to get familiar with it and then start training this, using the skills that he needs to direct the dog to do searches. And that's quite a lengthy process.
So this is the furthest we've gone with our dog search to this point, right?
Right.
Okay, so this is good.
This is good, yep.
All right.
That's all I have anyway.
Anybody have any questions of Brian and his report?
Is office.
You just want to, yeah, there you go.
There. Is Officer Jensen, he's going to be going down there for 2 weeks straight? Is that actually going to be his shift, or is he working a shift besides?
They'll cover part of his shifts.
Okay.
And also have to include his shifts. And I've worked out the schedule schedule, so basically, everything's filled in except one shift out of those 2 weeks, so.
Okay,
Or we lose part-timers, so otherwise we filled in with our own guys, so.
okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Brian.
Thank you, Brian.
Yep.
Move on to the planning commission reports. Sarah? You want to make sure that's on, please, so you're recorded? Yep.
Yep.
In your packet, you have a copy of the Planning Commission report. And we just had a meeting on Monday evening due to Veterans Day was on a Tuesday. We couldn't hold a meeting on that Tuesday. We did hold a public hearing in regards to a rezoning of a lot, and you'll be taking an action item on that a little later on the agenda. And also in your packet was the September and October building permit reports. And you will also be taking an action item on the tax increment financing modification that we've already talked about this evening and was brought to the Planning Commission for their approval also.
Any questions of Sarah? So total building permits for the year appears to be about $5,621,241 in value.
Correct, that's a total building value, yes.
Yep. Permit fees that are at $45,880 for the year. Total fees for building permits through the year is $62,168.58.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else?
Any other questions? Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Move on then to the Airport Commission report. Vicki?
Okay, the Airport Commission, they met in regular session on Wednesday, November 12th. They had 3 main things on their agenda. They discussed the closeout report for the master project plan. There's quite a bit of documentation that has to go back to MnDOT and FAA on that. We are still waiting for the actual approval by the FAA of the updated airport layout plan, the ALP, but that's expected to occur shortly. We did review and update the 20-year capital improvement plan, and that has been uploaded to MnDOT Aeronautics, and you do have that in your packet. And what that shows is all the prospective projects that could happen, and this follows the airport layout plan and the master plan. So as we move year to year, we can select some of those projects and decide whether or not we want to do those. And then the final item they have is they're recommending that the city enter into a grant application with MnDOT Aeronautics for a new fuel pump and reader out at the airport. It's a very old system that we have. We're having quite a bit of problems with it. And MnDOT has come forward with a 60/40 grant proposal, and that is later on the agenda for your approval.
Any questions of Vicki in regards to the Airport Commission?
Most of the projects, the FAA is funding part of it.
Yeah, if you see on your, most of them are going to be right now 95% or 90% FAA, 5% MnDOT Aeronautics, and 5% city. So the first thing that we're going to do, if you look on the plan year, 2016 is actually 2015 physical construction season because the FAA, MnDOT Aeronautics, and the city, all 3 have different fiscal years. So that is why that is so. But when it says 2016 year, that's actually our physical 2015 construction year. And so we're looking at this coming year, perhaps replacing the beacon and then getting the environmental assessment study done for the rehab work that needs to be done on the runway, and then doing some signage. So not a lot of physical work out at the runway or out at the airport this coming season. But then the following season, we're looking at rehabbing that runway and putting in new runway lights and potentially widening the airstrip to 75 feet. So that is, that total project is higher than what we have in our NIPIAS funding at the FAA, but the FAA has agreed to look at discretionary funding and also borrowing forward from other cities that haven't used their funding. So our situation is really being sure that we have our local match. And at the end of that 2017 year, which is our physical 2016, that's as far as we know that 90%, 5% is in effect. After that, it goes back to 90-10. So the more that we can get done in the front end, the better, because it'll cost us locally half as much as we would then. So, but there's some, and then following that, then we don't have a lot of projects out at the airport. because the airport runway extension, although it shows on there, it will continue to get pushed out until there's a justification for extending it. So you'll see it on there, but we understand that that'll get pushed down further into the 20-year plan.
Okay, thank you.
I think, as Vicki noted, and it's very important for the community to understand that right now, when we're looking at 2015 projects, obviously we're going into 15 here shortly. It's as Vicki stated, it's a 90% FAA, 5% city, and 5% state, and those are dollars, as she noted, will not be available after the 2016 year. 2016 is a very large year for the airport based on this plan. However, there's a lot of things that's projected to happen in 2016 that we've been working on for probably 15 years. I mean, there's a lot of stuff in there that has been pushed back. And because the city approved the master plan recently, we now have the ability to go to FAA and the state to draw on those funds because the master plan was updated with this plan in place. So the master plan, as you recall, was updated or was approved in October, I believe is when it was, September.
We approved it in June. The
But the
FAA was
final-
expected to do it in October, but they haven't yet. We're still
Okay.
waiting for that
Okay.
final
Okay.
approval.
So the city approved that new master plan. We're waiting on FAA. These dollars and this plan is in anticipation that the FAA is going to approve our master plan that we recently approved. And I just think it's extremely important for the council for next year to continue on with the work and the plan that had been put in place for our airport. It's important, very important to the community, and I think we have the dollars, and if you have FAA behind you that's willing to allocate dollars from somewhere else to help you with your airport, you should take advantage of that, because that don't always happen.
Right.
So, thank you, Vicki, for your report. Moving on then to our action items. Action item 7A, approve the excess liability waiver. Vicki?
This is what Mark from the Minnesota National Agency was discussing earlier. This is the actual action item where he had recommended that we do purchase excess liability insurance and waive the limit. As you see in my report earlier, or he had mentioned as well, it's about $10,000 plus $1,100. So that's the total dollar amount that would be to buy this excess coverage, which is kind of like an umbrella policy, and then to waive that statutory limit or that tort limit. If we decide to waive it or not waive it, we do have a form that we do need to sign and send it back to the league to state that we actually discussed this and voted on it at a council meeting. So does anybody have any questions about that? Any additional information that you need before you make your decision?
I have some questions. I know in the past we've always waived, and we've always purchased the excess liability. And I think every year we've had discussion and we've challenged each other back and forth. Should we or shouldn't we? It's a policy, it's insurance. And I think I visited with Vicki earlier today because I was struggling with it once again this year, as I have for the last 10, trying to determine should we or shouldn't we. And it's hard to sit here and say we shouldn't if we needed it. It's hard to sit here and say we should if we haven't ever used it, because it's dollars. And we're looking at $11,100. And what I would like, Vicki, I don't know if it's you or Mark, but I'd like you to clarify for us is what is the total limit if we waive the statutory limit and we do not purchase the excess liability, or would we waive the statutory limit and not purchase excess liability?
Okay.
And help us explain it to us again.
Okay, so what you need to do is you need to refer to page 24 in your packet.
Correct.
And that's the chart right there that says what the claims would be. So you've got down the side, you've got your 4 options. If we do not waive and we do not purchase. And then it goes in if we do not have excess coverage, but we do waive the limit. And then you just keep going down, and there's different combinations of what you can do. We've always done the bottom one. We've bought the $1 million of excess coverage, and we've waived the limit. That's what's cost us the $11,000 a year. What that allows is that, say, a ambulance or a plow truck or somebody like that crashes into somebody and the city is liable, that allows that to go up to $2,500,000 for people to actually claim against the city, and our insurance would cover. if we don't waive the limit, then they're limited to what they can get. So part of it is like, what is the city's exposure? And the other part of it is, what kind of a community are you as far as covering somebody that might be out there that could be involved in that accident if the city was at fault? So it's kind of a decision, and the city has gone back and forth on this discussion, and I think right now, statewide, about half the cities go each way. So it's not like there's a trend one way or another so much, it's just that, a lot of cities, they kind of got on that, we need to waive this, we need to buy this excess liability, because some cities had some major claims that had happened. Things have quieted down a little bit, and so now it's about half and half of what we should do. So really, the decision is not only does the exposure does the city have, but also what about the person if we're responsible for some kind of an accident?
Mm-hmm.
Now, we haven't had any major accidents. It doesn't mean we can't in the future. It's an insurance. That's, you don't know. You don't buy it, you wish you would have. You do buy it, and you didn't use it, so
it goes from 1.5 million basically to 2.5 million, and it's
Correct.
to determine if 1.5 million, if we're comfortable with having a limit of 1.5 million, and if we're comfortable of setting a maximum amount on a per single claimant based on whether or not we waive the statutory limits.
correct, because if we don't waive it and we don't buy it, the maximum a person could get was 500,000.
That's
And then
right.
it would be up to 1.5 for that particular incident. If we waive it and buy the excess liability, that same person could actually have a claim up to 2.5 million.
That's
So-
right. So in my mind, I'm thinking to myself, it would make sense to waive it because the person then has the ability to get up to 1.5 million versus $500,000. I'm just I'm challenging myself with, do we need 1.5 or 2.5? And I think that's what our discussion here will be, because it's the difference of what, if we waive it or not, that's $1,100. If we waive it and choose to add an additional million, that's $11,100. So that's.
It's $10,000.
That's right. So,
The difference between, like if we did not buy the excess coverage, but we did waive it, that 500,000 for the single person would go up to 1.5 million, but the total for the accident would still stay at 1.5 million.
That's correct.
Okay, so you know that.
So the total does not change whether we waive it or not of the maximum amount, or the maximum amount to be claiming of 1.5 million.
Right.
For the occurrence. Anybody have any questions?
What's the cost difference between the four options?
Well, to waive is $1,100.
Okay.
To buy the excess liability is about $10,000. That's the 11,100 he was referring to. The excess liability is the more expensive of the two, but it serves a different function.
Correct.
What's the difference between last year and this year, dollar-wise?
It's about the same.
Okay.
Actually, parts of our insurance are going down this year, and parts of it are going up, so we're expecting kind of a flat.
Okay.
Mark, did you have more that you wanted to note?
This might help a little bit. Who needs excess liability coverage? It's part of your package here again. Cities end up with more, if they end up with more liability than it has coverage, the city has to either draw from its existing funds or go to the taxpayers for the judgment. So large cities faced with, say, $1 million of liability or above what the league has, they can raise that money and spread it out amongst more people. So in most cases, smaller cities need the coverage. If they exceed their limit, when you spread out that tax to recover that, to build up the funds, that would be more dollars per taxpayer to get those funds back. So normally it's the smaller cities that need that. So.
And I understand, the question is if there's a claim, I get it. If we don't have enough to cover that and it exceeds that, that's going to be a liability of the city. And we're going to have to cover that in one way or another, whether it's through us acquiring additional coverage or whether it's through us having to impact it via a tax increase the following year to cover those expenses. So I'm going to open it up again to the council for for either clarification or questions. There needs to be some action, as Vicki stated. We have to decide. We can't, like every year, like I said, we've always wrestled with it. And again, I would look for the council to make a motion, or if there's questions needed for clarification.
Do you got anything?
I don't have any questions.
Comment?
I guess I'd be willing to make a motion.
If you want to make a motion, go
Well,
ahead.
go ahead.
If you have
No.
comments, we can clarify, or comments or questions, we can clarify that.
Do that in the discussion.
Okay. I guess I'd like to make a motion, we purchase the excess liability insurance and waive the statutory limit.
All right. At this time, we have a motion to move forward with waiving the statutory limit and purchasing the excess liability coverage as outlined.
I'll second it.
All right, we have a motion and we have a second. Is there any discussion?
One of the things, the reason why I'm looking at this is because I understand all your points.
Yep.
But for this year, I think we've got it budgeted and everything. If we could, at sometime next year, maybe review this maybe a little bit sooner than just get it the weekend before we actually have to act on it. And with the new council, maybe things will change. But give them some more time too to do that and ask questions. For right now, I think we can stay where we're at.
So we'd be remiss if that question wasn't brought up and we didn't talk about it. And I know I've been on the other side of that too, you know.
Right.
A couple of years ago, I wouldn't have made this motion. I maybe would have supported it, but I wouldn't have made it. But yeah, it's, as long as the money is there and it's not much of a change, wasn't more than $3 difference, was it, between this year and last year? Vicki, or?
Sounds good.
And you know, again, that's the process that we have, and I think it's great to have the discussion. I think everybody's view about what is adequate coverage and what is excess is different. It's just where we're at. I think, 1.5 million in my mind per occurrence, and 1.5 million for a single claim seems adequate. Whether it should be 1.5 or 2.5, in my mind, is a difference of, in this case, about $11,000, and I'm comfortable with 1.5, but we have a motion in a second, so if there's no other discussion, we'll go ahead and move forward with the motion.
I just got one more comment. I think actually next year, if we go into the budgets scenario, when we're setting the budget for the following year, if we can take a look at that, considering it is $11,000, it's a large chunk and it is part of the budget. Maybe at that time we should review, see whether or not kind of what we're looking at, so we can set the budget accordingly at that time and look at the bigger picture. So just another comment to throw out.
Very good. Any other comments? Hearing none, we have a motion and a second to move forward with waiving the limits and purchase the additional $1 million in coverage. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Aye. Motion carries. 2 in favor, 1 against. All right, we're going to move on to approve orderly annexation agreements.
Okay, as part of the ongoing negotiations for the acquisition of the 59-acre Unger property and a portion of the 39-acre racetrack property, a proposal for annexation has been negotiated with Sauk Center Township. An orderly annexation agreement for each of the parcels was attached to your packet. What the agreement calls for is the city to reimburse the township for lost property taxes for a period of 5 years at a rate of $500 per year for the Unger property and $1,700 per year for the racetrack property, for a total reimbursement of $11,000. In addition, the agreement calls for the city to be responsible for the road maintenance of 410th Street from Trunk Highway 71 easterly to the racetrack, that's also known as Essler Street. The city limit is currently the center line of the roadway, and the township has been responsible for plowing that snow, but they are requesting that the city take over responsibility for that roadway. Sauk Center Township has unanimously agreed to this proposal at their board meeting last Wednesday night. One thing to note is the purchase agreement on the Unger property does state that if the city does not go through with the purchase for some unforeseen reason, that the annexation will not be filed and municipal boundary adjustments with them and will be null and void. So, but we are tentatively set to close on that property on December 16th. So pending anything that jumps out at us from the title opinion, we should be set to close well within that time frame. So what is in front of you tonight is resolutions 2014-88 and 2014-89 approving the orderly annexation agreements with Sauk Center Township. And this is the first time the city has ever done an orderly annexation. So that's a step in the right direction, I believe.
Thank you, Vicki. And I'll add a little bit to that. I know Vicki and Sarah and Warren and I from the Personnel and Finance Committee met with the township. And as Vicki stated, we have a lot to gain by working through orderly annexation agreements currently and in the future, because it shows all of us are on board and working collaboratively together to accomplish something. Obviously, anytime there's an annexation with the township, it impacts them financially in a lot of different ways. Working orderly with them and allowing us to mutually agree upon the amount of years and the amount of dollars that the city is going to pay back the township for those taxes is very important. And I say that because there used to be court statute that used to require how much you need to pay and how many years you need to. That's kind of gone away, and now you have a window. It's 2 to 7 years, minimum of 2 years, maximum of, is it 7 or 8? 8 years. And they had proposed 7, and we sat down and talked through why it was important for the orderly annexation and mutually agreed to 5. And so we're going to take over the maintenance of the road. We already had the responsibility of 50% of the road, so it's a matter of our truck having to go to the other side of the freeway, which we haven't had to do in the past for snow, but that's where we're growing. I mean, obviously, if you look at where the annexation and where the growth, where we envision our industrial growth, is south of the freeway. So we're gonna be over there anyways. We're gonna be maintaining roads. We're going to be doing a lot of work, and we're looking forward to working with the township on this issue and other issues that kind of have been set aside that needs to be revisited and to continue to work through. So this is just a new arrangement, and it's exciting to see that the city now is in a position that everybody can agree to a orderly annexation and now be able to move forward to address any other concerns in the future. So I want to thank the township and the city for working together. Not only that, it speeded up our process to get our TIF and everything else done. So it all was a big, it's taken a lot of time, and it was a big part of getting everything completed before year end. So with that, is there a motion to approve resolution 2014-88 and 89, approving the orderly annexation agreements as presented?
So move.
A motion by Warren, is there a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Keith. Is there any discussion?
We're voting on approving both resolutions, but if closing or something like that on one property doesn't go through, it doesn't affect the other one, right?
No.
Right, okay.
Two separate resolutions.
I just wanted to make sure it was clarified that people understand it's not a blanket thing here, so.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, I'll call the motion. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. 3 in favor, none against. All right, moving on to C, approve resolution 2014-87, amending the TIF plan. Vicki?
This is the amendment to the development district and the TIF plan budget, et cetera, that Tammy Amdahl had explained to you earlier. What this lays out is the actual resolution that will put that into effect, and then we will be, once we get that this document and the annexation document and everything signed, then we will be ready to submit that modification to the state. What the action requested is to approve Resolution 2014-87, approving the modification to Development District 1 and Tax Increment Financing District 1, and the development program and tax increment financing plan relating to thereto. That's the title of the resolution. So we're amending the boundaries, we're amending the budget, we're allowing us to retain those dollars for economic development purposes in that larger area.
Thank you, Vicki. And I'll again just note that this has been over a year's time, a work in progress, moving much rapidly over the last 6 months. But I want to thank Tammy for your presentation. It was very well put together. And I again want to thank Vicki for all the hours she's put in, assuring that we have the ability to not only amend our plan to be able to maintain those dollars that we have not used over the years and be able to allow us now the opportunity to utilize those dollars and develop and expand our industrial area to the south, which is what part of this whole plan was about, was to allow us to participate in purchasing the acres that we have approved last meeting. So with that, I'd like to ask for a motion to approve Resolution 2014-87, approving the modification to Development District Number 1 and the Tax Increment Financing District Number 1 and Development Program and Tax Increment Financing Plan relating to thereto.
So move.
Motion by Warren, is there a second?
I'll second that.
Motion by Warren and seconded by Keith. Is there any discussion? No. Hearing none, I'll call the motion. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. 3 in favor, none against. Thank you. Thank you, Tammy. Moving on to number D, approve ordinance number 751, amending the zoning map.
The Planning Commission held a public hearing on a request for rezoning on Monday night, November 17th. The property to be rezoned is located at the corner of Sinclair Lewis Avenue and Ferry Lake Road. This property was subject to the lot split approval in October. You do have the Planning Commission staff report with all the details of the proposal in front of you, and also the map of where that rezoning request is to take place. The request is to rezone this corner from single-family residential to industrial commercial, which is the adjoining property or boundary or zoning district, which will then allow the construction of an automotive detail shop. So you do have the staff report if you have any questions about that. I did include the application, and I also did include the current and the proposed zoning map change. And then once you've had a chance to review those, I have ordinance 751 amending the zoning map.
Any questions? No questions, there a motion to approve ordinance 751, amending the zoning map as presented?
So moved.
Motion by Keith, is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Warren. Is there any discussion? I have a question, have they already started construction down there?
No.
Oh,
No.
okay.
Not that I know of.
I saw a lot of work going on, so I was wondering. Huh? Yes?
They were doing dirt work, but no construction has started yet. They're just prepping the site.
So there has been some work in preparation of the site.
So even that's just for the landscaping ready to prep the site.
Thank you, all right. Any other questions? Hearing none, is there a motion to, oh, excuse me, there is a motion and a second. I'll call the motion. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. 3 in favor, none against. All right, moving on to E, approve submittal grant application for the airport. Vicki?
This is the grant application I referred to back in the staff report for the airport board. The airport board has been researching a replacement for the existing fueling system at the airport. The proposal includes a new pump and a credit card reader, along with the related computer transmission equipment. MnDOT Aeronautics will provide a grant for 60% of the replacement of the project. 2 quotes were obtained for the proposal. We have Zoll Petroleum at $28,328 and O'Day Equipment at $56,106. The difference between the two is that O'Day has an enclosed cabinet that doesn't fit on the existing concrete slab, so they'd have to redo all the concrete work, dirt work, and install the cabinet, so their bid was significantly higher. So after reviewing them, the airport board is happy with the lower bid. But the total project costs, including costs for Bolton Mink and the city costs, would be $29,628. So they're recommending to apply for a grant not to exceed $31,000. This would be a local share for the city, which is the airport, of $12,400, and the airport fund does have funds in hand for that. I did include in your packet a copy of what the fuel system looks. It looks like a gas pump, except it does have a separate card reader. They're not to the point yet where you can get the card reader right into the gas pump and stay in this price range. So the board is requesting that the city approve the grant request, and this would be work then that would be done probably early spring. And this would then allow us to hopefully not have the problems that we've had with that card reader in the last probably 3 years that we've been going through that, so.
And Vicki, this don't qualify for FAA portion just because it's equipment on site, it's not part of it.
The FAA will not provide funding for revenue-generating facilities until all your other airside needs are met, so.
Okay. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. With that, is there any other questions of staff?
I guess there was one, this is going to be handled different. There's no limit on this one as well.
What we were having trouble with before with the old system was people would like swipe their debit card and then their bank would like attach $1,000 and you couldn't get access to it until after the transaction cleared through. This one's going to be more of a direct connect. So it's only going to take out, it's your company, your bank, or your credit card is only going to attach and hold up as much money as you actually used. So that's going to be one of the big things, because it's not fun to be here in the morning and someone calls and says, I was at the airport and you guys just charged me $2,000 for 100 gallons of avgas.
Happens.
So this is the new system. It's direct connect. It's not modem dial-up like we're using out there right now.
Do we have all of the connectivity things addressed? Is there any additional needs for the communications between this and their
But we have
center?
everything on site in the building that we need, to the building already.
Okay.
Probably some new wiring from the pump itself, the card reader itself, into the building, but it's right next to it.
Okay. Any questions? Is there a motion to approve the MnDOT Aeronautics grant request for airport fueling system as requested?
So moved.
Motion by Keith and seconded by Warren. Any discussion? Call the motion. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. 3 in favor, none against. All right, that takes us to our unfinished business this evening. Beltline Road project. Vicki, Keith, I'm not sure who wants to
I'll start
present.
and then he'll tag right in, I'm sure. Okay, so at the last council meeting, the council received an update on the proposed stormwater control options. If you recall, we were talking alternatives and options, and it got rather confusing. So I took those options and I have them in the packet, Alternative 1, Alternative 2, and the new Alternative 7 that you requested at the last meeting. Alternative 1 was the first one that would have new storm sewer on the west side across the highway, Trunk Highway 71, to the existing 36-inch pipe just prior to Guest House. Would have the 2 surge basins on the west side and one on the east side, and the one on the east side would be the one by Fairlane Drive. This was the option that was the $700,000 option. And then we had Alternative 2, which is the same on the west side of the road, except east, that added new pipe and took it to a basin east of Walmart. That was the $976,000 option. So those maps are in your packet, so you can see that's where we were at. And then the council at the meeting was saying, well, how about if we eliminate the surge basins on the west side? And then of course, that required upsizing the pipes. And then take it across 71 and go along the freeway fence to a pond in the back of Walmart. So that was the new update that you have in your packet at $1.348 million. So that does accommodate removing those ponds to the west side that the council had asked him to look at. It does not affect the existing storm system on the east side by the Fairlane, et cetera. So it would take pressure off that system. So they all have their benefits, but this kind of gives you, this is what you get for each of those prices. And we just brought it down to these 3 options. These are the ones that were the 3 favored options. And then I think Keith probably has some additional information for you. I have been working with Northland Securities on a variety of funding alternatives on how we can make this funded, and we can do that. The thing is, the city would just have to decide, and understand that there would be a levy component to the higher option here, because, we don't have utility funds, et cetera, enough to cover that big of a project. So,
Vicki, you want to give a little bit of, your mic's making noise again, you want to give a little bit of your overview on the bonding option?
Well, the first thing that we talked about was we did have that project fund and an old bond fund to close out, and if you allocated that to this project, that would take about $300,000 off the top of the project. So the number one alternative, we'd have about $400,000. If we did a stormwater utility, we would take about $25,000 a year out of our existing utility, and that would fund that project. The second alternative, we could use some of those utility dollars, but not enough, so there would be a levy component to the total bond. We'd probably have about 25 utility and about 25 levy a year. And then the third option, of course, the total would be about $65,000 a year. So you'll see that we have to have these varying dollars to meet of which we would have stormwater utility and levy. So we're talking, there would be a levy component to alternative 2 and alternative 3, which would not be for 2015, that would go into effect for 2016, but you need to understand that there would be a levy component. It would actually be considered a street reconstruction bond on the levy part of it, because they are reconstructing a street under which this stormwater will go. And that does take a public hearing. It's subject to a reverse referendum, where if enough signatories out in the community come back, and they can reverse that referendum. So there is that option, that challenge out there. We have used a reverse referendum bond once before, and it was when we refinanced the building. Not the existing time this building was constructed, but when we refinanced it, we did that to obtain a lower interest rate on a reverse referendum, and we did not have a problem with it at that time. So I guess on the funding side, we can do it. It's just, what is your thought process on a levy component in future years?
Thank you. Keith, I have some questions for you.
Won't touch it. Mayor and Council, I'll just have a couple of quick comments, and I'll answer any questions you may have. And related to alternate 7, which is the new one you have, a couple things on the west side, right at Getty and Beltline. It's kind of a detail, but I know Councilmember Stone asked about if we can avoid having open channel flow when that culvert comes across the road to the south. And the answer is yes. That's kind of a deep design detail, but that would be taken care of as it relates to, so there really isn't any overland flow in that northwest corner of Getty and Beltline there. You'll note that the pipes are upsized, a whole pipe size along Beltline, and that's a relation of we don't have that detention of the stormwater, so we have additional flow. You'll note that we've moved that crossing. We cross north and south across Beltline on the west side of 71, and then jack across 71. That's meant to reduce the disruption in the area instead of going across and north and south on the east side of Highway 71. This also does pick up the water from that existing culvert. You'll note the dash line there coming across from the interpretive center across, so we pick up that water so we can avoid some current issues that there are with the water flowing in that kind of shallow ditch adjacent to American there. There are a number of easements, obviously, that'll have to be acquired with this, all the way from all the properties from McDonald's on the north end all the way down through Walmart, and also the vacant parcel to the east of Walmart where the pond would sit. The pond, we have a fair amount of excavation for the pond. Just like Walmart, if you've been out there, the pond kind of sits way down, and just because of the topography there. So we have to move a lot of dirt to get down to where we actually have some usefulness out of the pond. However, that would be a benefit for that property owner sometime in the future. So just a few comments related to that, and I'll answer any questions you may have.
You had in alternative 7, which was the council had asked for an additional alternative from 1 and 2 in our last meeting, but do you not going to have some restriction to flow when you come up along 12th Street to Main, and then you go south, and then you go east again, and then back down south? Part of our challenge today on the north side of that intersection is restrictions because of that 90 degrees and that flow.
Yeah, I understand your concerns and comments regarding it. It really isn't necessarily just about the turning, it's also related to the types of pipes and how they're connected together in that existing system. The modeling actually includes those, what we call head losses for those turns and whatnot that you have. Well, just like we did out here when we have larger pipes, we tried to do some sweeps. If you recall, we did some things out here on 4th. We tried to do some of that to minimize some of those impacts, but those head losses from those are included in our modeling. So we certainly would not anticipate any detrimental impacts because of that.
Would that require you then to have to increase the size because of that restriction?
No,
is that why it's gotten so large?
It's not enough to make that bit of that much of a difference, no.
It seems to me that the proposed alternative 7 has almost all 4 feet piping, 48 inch, something, then going all the way up to 54.
Right. The only reason it's 54 is we have to kind of flatten out through backside of Walmart, so it's just a grade issue, so we have to flatten out, which makes it have to have a larger pipe through there.
How are you determining the size of that piping? Is it based on the flow that currently is flowing down Getty and 12th Street, or it just seems large to me, so I'm questioning.
Yeah, well, there's a large drainage area that comes through. It's all based upon developed land use of the tributary area. The tributary area that flows through there. So it's all based upon a fully developed, which virtually all of that is a fully developed area that flows, especially if we talk about the west side, that's already there. And that's based upon those land uses, based upon the amount of time that the farthest, drop of water, if you will, gets to and collects to this point here. So, it's all based upon how we've done everything else to come up with those sizes. Then from there, it's really based upon the grades that you have. So, obviously the flatter things are, the larger pipes you need. If we had a little bit steeper, we'd be able to have something that was a little bit smaller. But, we're trying to keep, the grade kind of comes up a little bit behind Walmart, so we're trying to keep things as shallow as possible. As an example, like going adjacent to American there, that's probably the tightest spot through there. And we're about 12 feet deep through there. So it's not terribly deep. When you think about a 4-foot pipe, there's only 8 foot of cover on it, so it's not terribly deep through there. So those are the ways we try to keep our costs down as best we can. It's always a balance between pipe size, depth, grade, and trying to come up with the most economical solution we can.
So your option 1, I'm sorry.
No.
So your option 1 goes back to our concern in the beginning, which was the holding ponds.
Yep.
And I think we have holding ponds in options 1 and in option 2, if I remember right, yes. Both of them have a holding pond on the end of Getty Street and also up along 12th Street and also along
Fairlane or next to Walmart.
Yep.
And this last one only has the one in the
Correct.
southwest corner of the vacant parcel.
Your dollars and your projected cost for alternative 1 included the purchase of those ponds.
That's correct. Our estimate based upon land values that we have. Obviously, when you go into negotiations, it could change a bit, but it's based upon the value of the land. All of these are done the same way.
Understood. One of my reasons and one of my concerns with option 1 from the beginning was I had concerns about the ponding. Should we be utilizing property for creating ponds? However, when I compare the pricing, $695,000 versus of $1.35 million just to appease the council to not put in holding ponds is a lot of money. And I can't in my mind justify putting those dollars into 1.4 million into a project we can get done for 700,000 because we don't want a pond on the end of Beltline or along Fairline. I think there's better use of that property, but no matter what, the tax value, if it was developed, isn't going to exceed those types of dollars. So I'm going back to my option one theory. Is there any challenges with option one that we have not seen or that we're concerned about after you have looked at a third alternative and you have brought an additional option to the table?
As I see it, really, the challenges for any of them are we have to acquire property, acquire easements, but all three of them have the same challenges related to them.
Okay.
The rest of it's pretty simple in terms of getting the pipe in the ground, those kinds of things. It really is we have to get property and we have to get some easements.
Option one.
Alternate 7 has the most easements and property we need to acquire.
Option one, we have the ability to do this without levying money or without levying for this project. Correct, Vicki? It would require us to take $25,000 a year out of our stormwater utility fee dollars. Is that correct? And the remaining dollars, we have either through an existing projects that we have not utilized, or we have dollars set aside to be able to address that. Again, that drives me back to alternative one because I'm not out taxing for another stormwater project, which we just got them finishing doing here on 4th Street. And we did on Ash Street, and we did on Sinclair Lewis, if you look at the past 10 years. My thought at this point, based on where we're at in this project, we have to make a decision soon, preferably tonight, because you have to let the county know what we plan to do.
That's correct. I mean, last time we talked about we want to move forward, but we needed to determine exactly how we were going to move forward. So the county kind of is aware of that. They're waiting for us to, how we're going to move forward. They're aware of all of these three alternatives. They've been sent those, so we've discussed them with them. And they frankly don't really care from their perspective. They just want something to be done one way or another for us.
So you just answered my question. The county is okay with any of the three options if we were to choose one versus the other?
Correct. But the only concern that came up was related to other utilities, primarily the power lines have to be removed. But any of those really don't have any issues with that power line being moved for the roadway. So that's really not an issue with ours.
All right, thank you. I apologize, Council. I'll open it up to your questions.
No problem. Alternative one west of Main Street has got 36-inch line going up to Getty Street with the two ponds. Is there any reason why we can't take what you've got shown in alternative 7 west of 71 and put that as 48-inch?
Not sure if I'm understanding. Are you saying can we?
Well, we got 36-inch line going up and with two holding ponds.
Correct.
On alternative 1.
Correct.
Can we increase that size of that line west of Main Street to 48 inches and eliminate the holding ponds without a huge increase? It does affect the east side, I know, but
probably I didn't run that because most likely not, because we're pretty well maxing out that system going along the east side, that 36. Now we're having a 48, all that extra flow going into that 36. I'm quite sure it's not going to work, but I didn't actually run that scenario, but I'm 90+% positive that will cause issues.
okay, if on alternative 7, it shows, the mayor talked about the 3 corners there going underneath 71. Or restricting. Are we boring? Or
we'd bore 71. We wouldn't bore. We'd phase it with the construction for the belt line, so we wouldn't bore that. That would be a traditional open cut. There.
Okay. So, is there a chance that you can bore at an angle, kitty corner across that intersection, or has it got to have 90-degree corners in it?
It's possible. Both, well, in this case, it'd be MnDOT. MnDOT would usually doesn't look favorably upon that type of an approach. It's possible, though, to do that. That's kind of a design detail that we could get into and see if that's doable to go along those routes. But those really aren't that big of an issue. I mean, what you have a large enough manhole, you put a nice long radius sweep within them. We really don't see many issues. It really is entirely different to kind of the system that's out there now and the way the water flows through there. There's different sizes pipe, there's different shaped pipes. The way they're connected at the manholes is not ideal. It doesn't provide good flow characteristics. So it really isn't, although there are 90-degree bends, it really isn't a significant issue for head losses through there.
Okay, now if we went in alternative 7, if we did go along behind all them businesses, all it would take was one business not to grant us an easement, and that option would be dead in the water, right?
Well, I mean, the council always has other options to acquire the property, but it does take some additional steps to go through. You know, condemnation ultimately is where it would potentially have to go.
Right, which personally I don't like that idea, so.
Right, but you know, remember, we have this on all of them. You know, if we can't find a willing seller, we have the same issues are possible with all 3 alternatives in front of you.
For your holding ponds, he's referencing.
Oh, for holding ponds, right?
Yep, all of them, because you gotta have a willing seller, and otherwise we have to take all other options that are available to the city.
Okay. Keith, any questions?
Yeah, I just had one other. We had talked about doing this in a 2-year project as well. And I would tend to agree with, I think alternative 1 is the way to go. I'm just wondering if we expand to do alternative 7 in the future, we won't have to rip up anything on alternative 1 to make it tie in with alternative 7 in the future.
Let me just ask you a question, make sure I'm understanding are you suggesting we would do alternative 1 as sort of phase 1 and do perhaps what would be the remainder, the east side of alternative 7 sometime in the future?
Quite
Is that
possibly.
what you meant? Okay. The only thing we would have to do is we would have to put in those larger pipes. We'd have to realize that in the short term, on the west side that is, we'd have to realize in the short term we're not really utilizing all that capacity. Well, we'd have to, because we don't have the ponds there, we would probably still have some chance of flooding in that area. It would be significantly less, but we would have some chance until such time as we got the rest of that leg installed. Plus then we have to, we'd have to build a pond. Now granted, that pond could be temporary, could be filled back in and someone could build upon it in the future. That could be done. You know, the one on Fairlane for a phase. So that could become developable land again. So it's possible from that perspective. I'd say the only downside is we would not entirely get rid of the flooding concerns on Getty there. We would still have some. It would be significantly better than what it is now. But there'd still be that chance for those really larger events that we could have a little issue there.
Then I guess my second thing, it's not a question, but I realize that they're waiting to hear an answer from us so they can go ahead with their project. So I think it is kind of time sensitive that we do something, and alternative 1 may alleviate a lot of problems in that area. So
The one question I've got is they're waiting for an answer, but basically what we're just, does our design affect their road building that much?
What our design affects is if we choose not to do anything, they're going to move forward and only do what's needed for their project, period. And therefore, if we came back later, we would have to be potentially tearing up part of that road again to put some of these improvements in at a later point in time.
But I think that at the last meeting, we had already committed that we were going to do something, but I'm trying to understand.
Right, that's assuming we do nothing. We committed to moving. If we move forward with something, we still got to decide exactly what it is we're moving forward with. So we have to do, I mean, we have to do something, or we have to essentially do nothing. I mean, there really isn't too much in between. It's probably one of these three options you have in front of you in terms of the west side, or we do nothing and we deal with it at some point in the future.
To answer your question, we committed at the last council meeting that we were participating.
Yep.
So they know already we are participating.
And they have been told that at this point.
So the question is in what phase, in which job project, based on the proposals, do we want to participate in what design? So do you want to design option 1, 2, or 7 are the alternatives based on how they're proposed? So I want to go back to, though, if I could ask Keith and Keith the question. You had mentioned about if we were to do option 1 and then consider doing something like option 7 in the future. If we do option 1, we're going to bring the line all the way across east, all the way east across Main Street on the north side.
Correct.
And we're going to then go into the existing line. And then it doesn't show it here in this proposal in option 1, but I believe then we were adding some new piping and things down along 12th Street down further, correct? Fairly?
Alternative
To
2
the
shows
east, no,
it.
that's alternative
So
2.
let me go back then to option 1, because I don't show any of the east here on my alternative 1 plan. I don't show anything on the east side.
There is no pipe east of what you,
It's the second side of that, it's on the same page.
yeah, it's on the same page.
It's half and half.
So what you see on alternative 1,
So everything is existing with the exception of then the pond along Fairlane is the only thing we're adding on the east side.
that's correct. There is what's not really shown, there is a short piece of pipe that would go from the storm sewer in Fairlane into the pond.
Okay.
So that would be the only little thing there.
Thank you, sorry about
If we did something later, say if we did alternative 1 and tried to do alternative 7 later, there is a little bit of waste. One is we have to dig out the pond, and then we have to, someday in the future, someone will have to fill it back in again.
Okay.
Say we wanted to go to more towards alternative 7. There's also a little bit of infrastructure essentially in that, what would be the northeast corner of Beltline and 71. We go really to the east edge of the Holiday Station there. So there's probably 150 feet potentially of storm sewer that would not have to go in if one was to turn and go south with alternative 7. So there's a little bit of redundancy there. It still could be utilized in the future for, when 71 gets upgraded, there's some potential for some connections there. So it's not necessarily throwaway, but it's, it is pipe that's not necessarily needed for the city's perspective. If we were thinking of going to alternative 7 and you really didn't want the ponds on the other side, then I would suggest that we would do essentially the west half of alternative 7 and then do the pond on Fairlane for, that would be the project. And sometime then in the future, you could make changes and go with the rest of 7, if you will, and get rid of that pond on Fairlane. That's what I would see as a reasonable phasing to, if you really thought you wanted to go that route sometime in the future.
So if we went back and just did option 1, would we look at doing that in a 2-year project? Because option 1, 80% of your cost is year 1, because you got to get across to the east side of Main Street or 71.
Well, I would think in order to relieve, you really need to do the pond and the pipe. I would suggest to you that you do it all in one phase and get it all done with option 1 in 1 year. Option 2, frankly, I would say the same for all of them, to be honest with you, that's probably the best thing for us to do, would be to get it all done. It would eliminate the flooding problems. It's not a significant impact. There's not enough work to really justify doing it in 2 phases. Alternative 7 really pretty much has to be all done. There's really nothing,
right.
Otherwise it's kind of a waste. Otherwise you have to do all of 7.
All right. Is there any other questions?
I don't.
Hearing no other questions, does anybody like to entertain a motion?
I would make a motion that we, we do option alternative 1.
Okay, so let me just clarify your motion if I
Yeah.
can. The motion being that we move forward with alternative 1, which are figures 2 and 3 for a total of $695,879 based on the presentation.
That would be my option, or my motion.
All right, we have a motion, and do we have a second? I'll second it. We have a motion and we have a second to move forward with alternative 1. Do we have any discussion?
The only thing I'm confused on is, maybe it's obvious and I just can't see it, but you look at the west side of 71, basically alternative 1, alternative 2, and alternative 7, west of 71 is all basically the same design. And that's the only part that's going to affect the county. So,
Yeah.
you know, how the design on the rest of it is going to affect what the county has to say or whether what we're doing. I just, you know, other than the size of the pipe, which is a design issue, I don't know.
It's all getting designed and bid into one project.
That's right, with the county.
Yeah.
Okay.
My only, I was going to ask one clarification, is we kind of talked about whether there was a desire to look potentially in the future at alternative 7, which would mean the west side would change, so it would really be the west side of 7 versus the west side of 1 and 2. There's kind of 2 different options for the west side, so I just wanted to throw that out and make sure.
Because the west side of 7 is 48 inch.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So
Compared to
it'd be a
36.
little more money, so it'd be a little more money than the 700,000, but it would set you up for doing something different in the future if you choose to do so 1 year later on, 2 years, whatever. So, but that, I just want to kind of clarify to make sure you were thinking which part of the west side is that you for sure want to do.
I understand that
Oh, go ahead.
the current motion that we have is that alternative 1 is the design based on your alternative 1 here. It has nothing to do with alternative 7.
Yeah, right. I just wanted to clarify,
Yep.
just to make sure that was clearly the understanding.
Yep.
Okay,
Yep,
great.
I do understand. Really stupid question. What is in there currently, I mean, size-wise?
There's 24-inch pipe
Okay.
through there. Yeah.
Thank you.
And some square and round, different size shapes.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, I'll call the motion. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. 2 in favor, 1 against. All right, we have no new business this evening. We do have our consent agenda in our packet. In our consent agenda this evening, we got a schedule of claims, a total of unpaid claims of $73,299.53, paid claims of $18,109.59 for a total of $91,409.12. We also had 3 payrolls in September, and we also had September checks numbers 2334E through 2347E, and also 035612 through 035715, totaling $369,303.76. We have nothing else on our consent agenda. Is there any questions about the detail on the schedule of claims as presented? Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So move.
Motion by Warren, is there a second?
I'll second that.
Seconded by Keith. Is there any discussion? We'll call the motion. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. 3 in favor, none against. We have nothing else on our agenda this evening, but I do want to add one additional informational item. Sauk Center is in the process of joining the Red Kettle campaign, and Sauk Center happens to have a kettle coordinator. Her name is Stacy Michaels, and Sauk Center's participation in the Red Kettle campaign will be running from December 4th to December 24th. You will see more and more information about this over the next several weeks as people start to sign up to participate in this. Obviously, it's ringing the bell and being part of the Salvation Army's fundraising event. It's good to note that 82% of the money that's raised is spent right here in our district. And also, it's for disasters, and we've had those in the past. I know in several cases we have used more than once the Salvation Army to help our community. So I would encourage everyone to participate if you can. We will have it posted here, how to get involved, and we will bring this up again at our December meeting. So I just wanted to share that. I just got this hot off the press tonight, just before I walked in. And so anyways, please get involved. With that, I have nothing else on the agenda. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Motion by Warren, is there a second? I'll second
I
it.
will second that.
All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. This meeting's adjourned. Thank you.